Have you ever been trapped in a dark, dank pit with no way out? If you're like me, then you know it can be pretty scary. But one man was able to escape his terrifying situation by using only fire and rope. And you won't believe how he did it. A while ago, two men were exploring the Egyptian catacombs when they got lost. They had no idea where they were or how to get out. They were desperate for help, but nobody could hear their cries. It seemed like all hope was lost. That is, until one of the men remembered something that helped them both escape. But before we get into how these men escaped, let me tell you a little bit about the catacombs themselves. The catacombs are an underground tunneling maze system where over 60 million people have died. It's considered to be one of the deadliest places in the world. And if you're not careful, you just might become another statistic. The explorers had wandered around the catacombs for hours, but they couldn't find the exit no matter how hard they tried. They were starting to panic, and their breaths began to quicken. As they continued deeper and deeper into the tunnels, the air grew thinner and harder to breathe. Their vision started to blur, and they felt like they were going to pass out from exhaustion. One of the explorers fell to his knees and told his friend that he couldn't go any further. He was absolutely exhausted and terrified of what might happen if they didn't get out soon. His friend knew he couldn't leave him behind, so he tried to help him up. But to his horror, the other explorer's body went limp, and he collapsed to the ground. The man who had collapsed wasn't breathing, and his heart had already stopped beating. The other man knew he had to do something fast if he wanted his friend to live. So he did the only thing he could think of. He began performing mouth-to-nose resuscitation. As he was doing this, he looked around frantically for something that could help his friend. Then he saw it, a small piece of rope sticking out from under a rock. He grabbed it and ran as fast as he could to his friend. He tied one end of the rope securely around the explorer's mouth and the other end to a nearby stake. Then he started pulling on the rope, trying to get his friend to breathe again. The man's heart had already stopped beating for over 10 minutes, but miraculously, after several attempts, he was finally able to get his friend to take a breath. The man who had been performing the rescue was exhausted, but he knew he wasn't out of the woods yet. He had to keep his friend alive until they found a way out of the catacombs. Luckily, the rope that he had used to help his friend breathe was also strong enough to support his weight. So the man did something crazy. He tied the other end of the rope to a rock and began climbing down into the pit. The man climbed down into the dark, dank pit and immediately regretted his decision. It was cold, damp, and smelled like death. But he knew there was no turning back now. He had to make it to the bottom of the pit in order to save his friend's life. As he descended further and further down, the air grew thinner and harder to breathe. The man's heart started racing, and he could feel his blood pounding in his ears. Finally, he reached the bottom of the pit and collapsed onto the cold, hard ground. The man was hurt and scared, but he knew he had to get back up if he wanted to save his friend. He started climbing back up the rope, but it was too slippery, and he began sliding down again. The man panicked and tried to grab onto the rope, but it was too late. He was sliding down the pit, and there was nothing he could do to stop himself. The man landed on the ground with a thud and could feel the pain shooting through his body. He had broken his leg and knew he wouldn't be able to walk. The man was in shock and didn't feel anything else. When his friend saw that he wasn't coming back up, he started to panic. He began shouting his friend's name, but there was no answer. He started climbing down the rope himself, but it was too late. His friend was already gone. The man who had been stuck in the pit was lucky to be alive, but he had no way out, and no one would be coming to rescue him. The man knew he had to do something fast if he wanted to survive. He started looking around for something he could use as a weapon, and that's when he saw it, a burning piece of cloth sticking out from under a rock. The man grabbed the cloth and ran as fast as he could to a nearby tree. He tied the cloth around the tree and made a makeshift torch. The man started walking towards the sound of the roaring fire, and soon he saw it, a small opening in the wall of the pit. He crawled through the opening and found himself in a small dark room. The man took a deep breath and started exploring the room. He found a small pile of rocks and decided to make a fire. The man gathered some dry leaves and twigs and placed them around the rocks. Then he took his torch and started making a fire. As the fire grew, the room started to fill with smoke. The man coughed and waved his hands in front of his face, trying to clear the smoke away. Suddenly he heard a loud roar and felt something hot and furry brush against his leg. The man screamed and jumped back. He turned on his torch and saw a huge lion staring at him. The lion took a step forward and let out another roar. The man was terrified, but he knew he had to do something. He grabbed a stick and started waving it around, trying to scare the lion away. The lion wasn't impressed and took another step forward. The man screamed and threw the stick at the lion. The lion let out a hiss and backed away. The man kept yelling and making noise until the lion finally left the room. The man was shaking and scared, but he was alive. The man walked out of the room and into a long, dark tunnel. He didn't know where it would lead, but he had to keep moving. As he walked, he started to see light at the end of the tunnel. He picked up his pace and soon found himself in a small cave. The man crawled through a small opening and found himself in a large open area. He had escaped the catacombs and was now in a small forest. The man was exhausted and hungry, but he was alive. As the sun started to set, the man built a small fire and sat down to rest. He was safe, but he knew he had to find help. If he wanted to get out of the forest, the man started walking towards the sound of a nearby river and soon came across a small village. The man knocked on a nearby house and explained what had happened to him. The villagers were amazed by his story and offered him food and shelter. The man accepted gratefully and spent the night in the village. The next morning, the villagers helped the man to contact the authorities, and they were able to locate his friend's body. The man was sad to hear that his friend had died, but he was grateful that he had survived. The man became a local hero and was interviewed by many different news outlets. He shared his story and gave advice to others who might find themselves in a similar situation. The man eventually went back to his normal life, but he never forgot the lessons he learned in the catacombs. In the end, the man was able to escape the lion by using only fire and rope. The lion was attracted to the light and heat of the fire, so the man used that to his advantage. He made a big fire and used a rope to keep the lion away from him. Eventually, the lion got tired of being teased and went away. The man was able to escape the catacombs and survive. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe for more amazing content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.